Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on the birth of Merlin, and today we get to hear from the prince yet again in Act 2, Scene 3. Now, this prince had been wandering around in the forest because he saw a woman and was instantly struck by how beautiful she was and fell in love with her, but he didn't ask for her name. Sort of like Joan didn't ask for the name of the father of her baby, and that's why she and the clown were wandering around the forest. But he proclaimed to the trees that if he could find her, this would be a great thing. And when he and the clown and Joan interacted, and Joan was like, do you want to be the father of the baby? And the clown's like, you should be the father of the baby. Then he started beating up on Joan, and all this ruckus caused him to be discovered, and they brought him back to court. But back in court, Aurelius, the king of the Britons, has married Artesia of the Saxons, and nobody except for Aurelius thinks that this was a good idea. So he's made enemies on his own side, including Edal, who's gone off to sort of incite the Saxons and maybe start another leg of the war, another episode of the war. But Aurelius is there like on his wedding night, and he's like, how come people aren't being more fun and friendly and having a great time? I just got married. Everybody should toast my bride. And they're all like, no, we don't like her and we don't approve of this. But there was a little bit of like a magic battle off between the hermit and the Saxon magician, and the hermit won, which then we start to see some of Artesia's true colors, where she's like, the hermit, maybe he's not as great as everybody thinks that he is, and this and that, and she starts to seem a little maybe nefarious in all of these dealings. But then Arthur Pendragon comes in, the prince, and he's like, that's the woman that I fell in love with. Who is that? And Aurelius is like, that's my wife. And he's like, oh my goodness, I'm in love with my brother's wife. This can't happen. This can't be. This is not good. But she kind of flirts with him. And then as she's leaving, she grabs his hand and says something that he spent yesterday's monologue trying to parse apart and be like, does she mean something by this? Is she not? And he finally resolved that he needs to just forget about it because this can't happen because it's his brother's wife. But before the scene is over, her waiting woman comes in and she's like, are you Arthur Pendragon? He's like, yeah, I am. And she's like, my lady sends this to you. And she sent him a token of a crab. And he takes from that a crab has a tendency to go backwards. So maybe this means that she does regret her choice to marry the king. But then there's a little bit of back and forth between the prince and this waiting woman that, I'm sure that you can find plenty of sexual innuendos in there for. And he's like, okay, well, when are you going to come get me to take me to your lady? And she's like, as soon as I can, I'm going to come and get you and take you to her. So he gives her a token to take to Artesia, and the waiting woman leaves. And he's left by himself to finish out the scene on stage by saying, oh, by any means, lady. What should all this tend to? If it be love or lust that thus incites her, the sin is horrid and incestuous. If to betray my life, what hopes she by it? Yes, it may be a practice twixt themselves to expel the Britons and ensure the state through our destructions. All this may be valid, with a deeper reach in villainy than all my thoughts can guess at. However, I will confer with her. And if I find lust hath given life to envy in her mind, I may prevent the danger. So men wise, by the same step by which they fell, may rise. Vices are virtues, if so thought and seen, and trees with foulest roots branch soonest green. And that's the end of the scene. So he's trying to make sense out of this. Artesia is married to his brother, but she's flirting and she sent him this token. He's like, what is her end game here? Is she in love with me? Is she in lust with me? Because then we're sinning against my brother, and that's a bad thing. Or this could be a political plot wherein she, as a Saxon, is trying to invade the Briton inner circle, whatever, and destroy us from the inside. And it may be an even more nefarious plan than anything I can actually think up. But he decides by the end of it that he's going to talk to her and try to figure out what's going on, because if he can figure it out, then maybe he can prevent it. So at the same time that he wants to go see her because he's in love or lust with her, you know, his vice of being attracted to her could turn out to be a virtuous thing, in that it could end up saving the kingdom if she and the other Saxons are plotting against the Britons. So, and that's the end of the scene. What I think is interesting about this particular piece, and actually quite a few of them in this play, is that they switch between verse and prose at interesting times. The first several lines of this are actually prose, and it's not till the last 6 lines that it switches over to verse, and those 6 lines also rhyme with each other, an AABBCC rhyme scheme. So it's just, there he is by himself, and oftentimes prose was used to indicate sort of a lower status or a lower level of intelligence, whereas verse was more heightened and showing more intelligence. So maybe in the first part of this speech where he's speaking in verse, and sort of his brain is spinning, you know, is she doing this because she loves me? Is she doing this because she's plotting something? Blah, blah, blah. That's the not so smart speech. But then as soon as he decides to take action, he's going to go see her to find out what's going on. And he's justifying to himself that, yes, this is right, and I might save the kingdom by doing this. Now he's doing rhyming couplets in verse. So just an interesting thing to consider if you're ever working on this piece, or a lot of the other pieces from this particular play. What does it mean when it's in verse versus when it's in prose? And how do you want to try to show that, if at all, when you're doing the piece? But anyway, that's the end of Act 2, Scene 3. So come on back tomorrow and we'll find out, is she plotting? Will Joan find a father for her child? Who knows? Come on back tomorrow. I'll see you then. Mwah.